And joining us now is Michelle Schneider, the partner and director of trading research and education for MarketGauge.com. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. What an afternoon, what a morning. Michelle, from a business perspective, what do you think are your biggest takeaways from the hearing that we just witnessed?
Well, this is a case where there's the business takeaway, but it overlaps with so many other things going on. I mean, generationally, it shows the great divide still. And when I hear expressions like, okay, boomer, I go, okay, I get it. Because there is a lot of that going on with this. And one of the questions that came up today is about the gamifying with Robinhood. And was listening to you before the break, and you and JD were talking about the fact that Robinhood actually did bring a lot of retail investors in. So the question is, have they actually promoted sort of this OCD behavior when they throw up confetti, et cetera, et cetera? And I think that's just sort of part of, the generational divide. But in terms of the business side, I mean, this is the things that we're looking into. Didn't expect very much today, like you said before, because this is a hearing. And what was obvious is that the Financial Service Committee doesn't really know very much about what happens in the market and how it operates. So here's what we're looking at. What happens with short selling? There's been some conversation about possibly putting a cap on it or putting some kind of tax on it. So that would be interesting to see where that goes from a trading perspective. Also, there was talk about just the whole idea of selling the order flow. So as JD was pointing out before, yeah, if you're paying zero commissions, they have to make some money somewhere. It shouldn't be such a shock. And then, of course, that brings into the question the whole idea of high-frequency trading, because that's what happens when the flow is sold, is that the machines, the algos, get those, and then they run and jump the stops. Well, that also has been going on pretty much since I've started trading, which was 40 years ago. It wasn't done with algorithms, but brokers on the phone would hear big orders coming in, and they would jump in front of these orders and then, basically have an advantage. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen there. The other interesting thing, though, one of the best things that I thought came out of it is this whole idea of education, because I'm all about education. I mean, that's basically what I do, is I constantly try to teach people about understanding risk. And when they're talking about options, they want some kind of a mass retail adoption. They want people to have an education about risk management and have an education about margins going up when things get too expensive. And then basically the final thing I can say is that the whole idea of social media and transparency, I think, was kind of blown to smithereens today in terms of manipulation when Roaring Kitty said that he was still very interested in GameStop and is still closed down 12, 13%. So we've proved that nobody can manipulate the market for very long. There's knee-jerk reactions, and that's pretty much it.
I think something that we also saw today was political theater being highlighted on both sides of the aisle. There were a lot of accusations. Do you think that we're going to see anything meaningful that both sides can come together on? I know one of the proposals that were sort of put out there with pros and cons was the financial transaction tax, which led to some of the most explosive moments in this hearing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I really hope it doesn't happen. I'm definitely against it as a trader. I am a retail investor, so that to me would be a disastrous situation, and I hope that doesn't happen. I really hope at the end of the day what this really turns out to be is a big, like you say, political theater with not much going on. Ultimately, it's going to be the Securities Exchange Commission that's going to have to make any changes. And if there is anything that come out of it, I think it would really be that ultimately it's a free market, and everything goes back to adjustments at some point, because it is a free market. So you get these blips. This is just part of trading. And I also really, really applaud the idea that the younger people want to trade and they want to get involved. And I think there's a lot of smart people out there. So I think what will happen is you'll see the dust fall apart in terms of the people that don't know what they're doing. And eventually, you'll see the people that are really smart persevere. And by the way, I'm listening. I want to know what they're thinking too, because they're coming up with some really good, innovative ideas. So the transaction tax would be terrible. And I'm really hoping, like I said, that this political theater ends, curtain closes, and that's the end of it.
We also know that there are potentially 2 more hearings just like this on the way. So in terms of witnesses, as much as I was entertained by having Keith Gill there, Roaring Kitty, and also the Reddit CEO, I don't know how much they offered in terms of clarity around a lot of these issues that were being explored today. Are there witnesses that you would like to see in the next 2 hearings?
to hear a little bit more from Citadel in particular. I think that there was some vague conversation today when he couldn't really answer the question in terms of people that pay zero commissions and people that actually don't, whether or not there's preference in where the order flow goes. I'd like a little bit more information about that. But there's no one in particular other than maybe some of the other players that have come up through Reddit. Besides Aurora and Kitty, it would be nice to hear from a couple of other people. And in terms of the politicals, as I said, I don't think they really know much about trading, so I'm not sure how much they're going to add to the whole conversation other than, to use your expression again, political theater.
And we also know that any implications, any legislation, any ramifications for platforms like Robinhood, those would come down through the SEC. We also know the SEC is in a period of transition right now. So what impact do you think that's having on the Hill and for these hearings?
Well, I try to stay out of the political bias here because it doesn't really help us as traders. But what I will say is that we've been listening to political theater in terms of antitrust suits for years now, and there have been hearings and nothing happens. So it's very possible that we're going to see the same situation here. There's going to be a lot of chatter, and then everybody will go back home, and there'll be more chatter about it and more chatter about it, and maybe we'll see another GameStop type situation along the way, and maybe not. But I don't really think that anything much is going to happen out of this, quite honestly, because ultimately the decisions are going to be made that everything runs smoothly and everything adjusts back to the way it's supposed to be. We have a free market. Let's keep it that way.
Michelle Schneider, Partner and Director of Trading Research and Education for MarketGauge.com. Thank you so much for hanging with us this afternoon and joining us here on Cheddar.